Hi everybody, it's Tatiana, and today I'm going to do the 10 favorite movies tag. I am actually redoing this video because the first one I did was way too long, and in the attempt to shorten it, it just turned into a cut up piece of trash. So I'm redoing it. Allyn had to redo hers when I saw hers, and she put some stipulations on hers, so I'm doing the same thing. The first movie on my list is Hard to Kill, starring Steven Seagal and Kelly LeBrock. Yes, this is a VHS tape. Your eyes are not deceiving you. I have a lot of movies on VHS that I have not yet bought in DVD format, so this is one of them. I love revenge and vengeance stories, and this is a great story about revenge. Steven Seagal plays a cop whose family is murdered, and he ends up severely injured and is in a coma for 7 years, and he comes out of the coma, and his entire mission is to get the people who killed his family. Next on the list is Die Hard. I am a huge Bruce Willis fan. My Bruce Willis collection is ridiculous. If you don't know the Die Hard series and the Die Hard franchise, you have been living under a rock. Crawl out and watch the doggone movie. Bruce Willis plays John McClane, and he is a cop who comes to his wife's Christmas office party, and they end up being in a hostage situation with a terrorist who is played by Alan Rickman, and Bruce Willis comes late, and he ends up not being in the room with his wife and all of her co-workers when the terrorists come in and they take them hostage. And so he spends the movie trying to get his wife and her co-workers safe and get rid of the terrorists. And yeah, I love Bruce Willis, but this entire franchise, it all started with this movie. Next on the list is The Crow, starring Brandon Lee. Brandon Lee plays Eric Draven, and he and his fiance. If you don't know this story, where have you been? Brandon Lee and his girlfriend / fiance are killed, and Brandon Lee's spirit does not die, and he comes back as the Crow to wreak havoc and avenge his fiance's death, and his whole goal is to get some peace for himself and to attempt to reunite with her spirit because he is lost. But during his attempts to get himself some peace, he fucks up the city. This is an example of what you want to happen when somebody that you care about is screwed over and they are severely hurt or killed. You want them to be able to avenge their deaths. Whether it's right or wrong, you want it to happen. You want them to have that ability, and if they can't do it, you want to do it for them. I absolutely love it. Next on the list is The Last Unicorn. It has Angela Bassett and Jeff Bridges and Mia Farrow as the main characters in this animated feature. Angela Bassett plays the unicorn, and she is on a mission to find the rest of her kind because she is the last surviving unicorn, and that mission takes her on a trek where she is transformed into a human, and no one except those who are magically inclined can tell that she's a unicorn. Everyone else who sees her thinks she's a horse, but there are people who do believe that she exists, and so she comes in contact with a couple people who can tell that do know that she's a unicorn, and one of them is the one who helps turn her into a human so that she can make her trek and her voyage without being discovered and possibly killed. Next is Chances Are, starring Robert Downey Jr. and I keep saying her name, Sybil Shepherd, and this is the story of a man who dies tragically, and his spirit comes back in the body of Robert Downey Jr., and he has lost his memories as he comes in contact with his wife and his daughter that he didn't know existed, and his best friend. He starts to remember things, and it makes him a little loopy at one point. And it also stars Ryan O'Neal. And of course it has a happy ending. It's a romance story, but this is what began my love for Robert Downey Jr. Next is X-Men, and I can't say enough about this movie. I love this movie because it is the beginning of the live action series of a franchise that I was obsessed with as a kid. I had the comic books. When the cartoons started, I watched the cartoons, and my brother from another mother and I used to have like debates and things like Big Bang Theory style about what versus the cartoon versus the comic, what was legit out of the two, and was it okay that they took this liberty with this is what happened in the comic. I loved the XMen franchise, and I loved the first movie. The way that they did the school, because on the cartoon and in the comic series, the school and the place where they lived always seemed larger than life. It's like, yes, it's a big place from the outside, but the fact that there were so many things on the inside of the school that were hidden, it just seemed so unreal and larger than life. And I think they did a really good job with making it real in the movie. The ensemble cast for this movie was full of actors and actresses whom I loved at the time. Patrick Stewart, whom I still love. Hugh Jackman, Sir Ian McKellen. There were things about the movie that I did that, as it got on, that I didn't like. In some of the other films, and I didn't like the pick of Halle Berry to portray Storm. But other than that, I love this movie. Next is Buffy the Vampire Slayer. This began my journey as a Whedonite. This movie did so poorly in the box office, and the series did so well on television, but you can't ignore where it began. And this began my love of vampire stories, and everything that I like about the paranormal and bitches who kick ass, all of that stuff. It started with this movie. Next we have The Long Kiss Goodnight. I love this dude right here, Samuel L. I love Samuel L. Jackson. I love this movie because, again, this is a revenge/vengeance story. It's got a strong woman, a chick who kicks ass. Gina Davis plays Charlie Baltimore, who's lost her freaking mind. And they go on, she hires Samuel L. Jackson as a private dick, and they go on a mission to find out who she is, because this dude pops up at her house and tries to kill her, and she can't remember why. And on the course of the journey, she does regain her memories, and she just goes and she fucks everybody up. There are so many classic lines from this movie, but two of my favorite are "Chefs do that" and "Life is pain, you just get used to it." Absolutely love this movie. The 1949 version of Disney's Cinderella. I love this movie because this is the first movie that I remember seeing that was totally set to score. As someone who loves music and who has always had a love for music, to be a child and having a movie like this with a commonly known fairy tale put 100% to score, and everything about this movie makes me happy. I can lay on the floor with just the soundtrack to this movie and pretty much recite the movie from start to finish. I have given words to what the birds chirp when they come to wake her up. I know what the mice say. I know what Cinderella says. I know what her stepsisters say. And every part of this movie I love. I have probably watched this movie a good 300 times. I can watch this movie over and over again. I have yet to get sick of it, and I think the first time I saw this movie, I was 6 years old. I love the moral behind the story, where no matter what you're going through or what you're dealing with, who you have to deal with, you can still be true to who you are. And in the end, that trueness to being who you are, unless you're crazy, deranged, or a sociopath, that your ability to be true to who you are is what's ultimately going to save you and get you out of the situation that you're in. Last on the list is The Neverending Story. I cannot say enough about this movie. I have watched this movie and have been watching this movie since I was about 7 or 8 years old. It is an adventure story about a young boy named Bastian who is bullied and scared to go to school on a daily basis because he gets picked up and bullied by these kids. And one day when they are chasing him, he runs into a bookstore, and this man is reading a book behind the table, and because the man tells him that it's not a story for him, he gets interested and he takes the book with him. And this is an awesome adventure story. One of the things that this movie says to me that I think is very important for people and kids to know is that regardless of what you're going through, sometimes your greatest adventure can lie between the pages of a book. And this movie actually heightened my zeal and my love for reading, because if Bastian can have this kind of adventure, so could I. That's what I thought as a kid. This is a movie that I would actually pay to see redone today. I do have a gripe with remakes because I think that the imagination of Hollywood is dying when the only thing that you can think of or do to make a movie is to recycle somebody else's work. But I would pay money, and if they did it in 3D, you can have my extra $350. I would pay money to see this movie done and brought current with today's technology, to see Falcor flying around, to see Fantasia redone for today, and the creatures in Fantasia. And I mean, they did so much with this movie, and this movie was done in 1984. So as much that was done with this movie in 1984, I can only imagine the great things they could do with this movie today. The rock giant has a monologue or poem in the movie that is not part of the book. And he's just so sad, and he feels so emasculated almost by the nothing. And the way that he puts his grief into words and the look on his face, and there are just so many good things about this story. It's a great adventure story. If you haven't seen this movie, The Nothing is a force that has been brought about by the death of the imagination of kids. So as a result of the death of imagination, therein lies the reason for the nothing and the death of this whole fantasy world that Atreyu is on a mission or on a journey to save. They did a better job with this book-to-movie adaptation than they do with a lot of book-to-movie adaptations of today. That's crazy. So those are my 10 favorite movies. If you have done the tag, put the link to your video in the comments below. If you haven't done the tag, or you don't record videos on YouTube and you want to share what your 10 favorite movies are, put them in the comments below, and have a good weekend whenever you see this video. Peace out.